All right, we're good to talk.
All right, that rocket that took off with the astronauts in it, that blew up,
Okay.
and everybody got killed on it, they blamed it on the O-ring.
I remember that.
All right.
The Challenger
All right.
in
Now,
the 80s.
I didn't know that was the name of it. I remember the name of it now, but they claimed it was the O-ring. All right.
Because of the
What
temperature.
I think it was a hot spot burn through in a void, which when they cast the fuel, they got two different, you cast them twice. You cast one with a booster propellant and one with a sustainer propellant. When it takes off, the igniter comes down through, fires the missile, all right? The booster propellant is a hotter burning, it burns first and gets it off the ground, and the sustainer propellant carries it to the destination, all right? But if there's a crack in the fuel, like a crack in the concrete, instead of burning down through the core, it burns on both sides of the crack. Then if there's a void in the fuel, when it gets over to the liner, which is there's a garlic liner on the inside, it used to be 816 that they lined them with. There's a red spray, but they started lining them with these garlic boots. You know, you can check with the garlic insulation and so forth. But when it hit the crack in the fuel, if it burned through and then there was a void between the fuel and air pocket, between the fuel and the liner, that whole thing would have ignited at one time and burned through, not the O-ring.
That seems to make sense.
Yeah, well, nobody said one thing about a hot spot or a burn through, all right? They always blamed it on the O-ring, you know? And then these here Allen wrenches, screws, ours had holes drilled and they had to be torqued, lock wired with so many turns in between, and in a direction so that they couldn't vibrate loose.
Seems to make sense.
You know what I mean? And with an exit cone, with Minuteman, they had 4 exit cones, 2 and 2, and then they had the brackets, and the cone was fiberglass, all right, and they had carbon throats. There's carbon throat right here. See it?
Yep.
All right, so that it don't burn the metal when it fires.
I had heard something about this being, there was some type of eBay, someone listed a sheet, was like a promotional sheet from the company that made the steel, talking about how this was such a high strength steel that goes into these solid boosters to allow it to deal with the pressures. And
this one here, I don't know, it looks to me like this is just the exit cone with the carbon throat, but it seems to me that there would have been a fiberglass cone on the outside of this. I don't think that's it.
Well, it had that cap that we took off right here.
It's got serial number on it too. Right.
And that fits snug.
That's just to keep foreign material out of there.
That's what I thought.
What I mean? But if you take this here loose, these 4 screws, this might look. You know what? It's got a snap ring in there. See it?
Yeah.
Right here. See the snap ring?
Yep.
So you can take those loose, and you can pry that snap ring in, and then you'll be able to get the exit cone off.
Okay. And see what might be in there still.
Well, you can see now down.
Yeah, I was looking for a flashlight. I don't have my flashlight with me.
I got a flashlight.
Yeah. I'm loving the stories.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's been no mention ever about that a crack in the fuel.
I watched that when I was in high school as it happened. I remember the walk home that day.
And I was going to call, son of a bitch, I don't have one here. I was going to call and dispute their claim But I said, what the hell good would it do? You know what I mean? They announced that it was a crack in the fuel, and maybe it's for security reasons. Plus, you know,
They're still using them.
I had a critical job classification, so that kept me out of Vietnam, because I was working in the industry making the. We made all kinds of boosters. The Polaris, the one that Evel Knievel jumped the river with.
Yep.
My line supervisor designed the. It's like a mortar, you know. And
That's cool.
They knew it wasn't going to make it, because of a mortar, you could tell where it's going to fall by the degrees and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Where with this here, he knew how long it was going to burn. He knew how far I had to carry it and so forth, so they just made it short for more interest.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but my line supervisor was the one that designed it.
That's,
you know.
That's.
And then we made Tartar, which was shipped to air. We made Hawk, which is ground to ground. We made a 30 KS-8000, was supposed to be a booster to the moon rocket. We had other long, skinny ones that were supposed to be put in a cluster. They weren't putting them in a cluster yet, but so that they would fire 4 or 5 in a cluster at the same time to break through the atmosphere.
Wow.
You know, so it's pretty interesting. You know.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Just the Evel Knievel thing's a story in itself, let alone all the other.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the line supervisor was on line 1 at Aerojet Engineering Corporation, solid rocket plant, and whoever the director of that line was, I don't know. There was only one guy I remember. His name was Barry, but one of the guys that worked with me, he's in a wheelchair right now, and he lives in Sacramento. You know, and but when I left, we had to put the units onto trailers to transport them, and then you had to lift them from a horizontal to a vertical position, and you had your 2 cranes at the same time, you know, but you had to put wheels on the rocket because there's like 8,000 pounds of fuel in the second stage Minuteman.
Okay.
And
I've seen some of those carts. I'm familiar with the launch sites.
What the cart looks like,
yeah.
The handling harness, and then it's got a bar down each side. Well,
and the launching.
when they cast the fuel, the son of a bitches didn't put masking tape over the bolt holes. And I was loading a rocket out to put on the harness that had both of them down, and there was fuel in the goddamn trench. And that son of a bitch went off, and there was like 8 rockets with the fuels off, with the app closures off in a row. But if I had put the bolt in from the other side first, when I put this one in, it would have went right through me.
Wow.
It's like a shotgun going off, you know, because they're supposed to mask them off. They invert them, put them in a casting belt, and then they cast the sustainer propellant first, then they take the core, strip the core, put the booster core in, and then cast it a second time. Then once they cast them, there's a lot of air pockets and stuff like that on top, so we had to hand trim them to the fuel to get rid of the air pockets. And then when they put the app closer on, it had to be right to the 10th of a thousandth. Because if you had an air pocket in there, you'd have a heart burn and it'd blow the app closure off.
Just like you were saying with the failure of the solid rocket booster possibility. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating.
When we first started testing them, I think it was around 1958 or 59, we had to leak check them with a Freon. So you would put the plugs in the exit cones, and you have the igniter in, and you put the Freon to it, the pressure with the Freon, and then you take like a Geiger counter and you go around it and check for any leaks. Well, the buildings were explosion type buildings with mounds of dirt in case there was an explosion, it wouldn't go and blow any of the other buildings down, you know. But they had the great big doors covered with asbestos, and we blew the plug blew out. They didn't have nothing to keep the plugs in. They put too much pressure on it, and the goddamn plug blew out and blew the door down.
That's crazy.
Just from air pressure.
Yeah.
You know? And then we were in ovens, in conditioners, and so forth. One guy, they had one building there, this was on line 1, where they were getting ready, they weren't casting, I think they were lining. But anyhow, they had a deluge system with the buttons and a glass insulator. So if something happened, you hit the button. And this guy hung his fucking jacket on the button, and when he went to brake, he went and grabbed it and set the fucking thing up, and it pumped the goddamn the units right up out of the fucking bay. And then we lost a couple of mix stations while I was there. And the mix stations, there's grind stations. The grind station's about 5 stories high, and they grind ammonium perchlorate finer than paste powder. So when you got 55-gallon drums and you're loading them into the hoppers and you move them, you can smell the goddamn oxidizer burning, or it's not sparking.
Reacting.
But the pressure, you can smell it. Like when you fire a gun or something like that, you can smell it.
Yeah.
You know? And then when you go into the control station, there's like a wall about 8 feet high, probably 6 feet high, maybe 10, 15 feet long, with all dials and gauges all over the thing. And some of them are screws, some of them are pumps, some of them are pressure, and so forth. And you have to, when you start a grind or a mix, and you have to bring them all up to whatever their feed line is, like if it's pressure or screw or whatever it is, and you bring them all up. And then if something happens, say you're on the 3rd floor and you got one of them over here that goes in the red zone, you gotta shut the whole goddamn thing down, go up, clean it out, and then bring it all up to pressure again so that you can continue with the grind, you know?
Very complicated.
Yeah, and then we blew one mix station there, and the guy that was running the mix station, you go in these concrete bunkers, then over, then in, then you hit the red light. Nobody can come in. It's like a stoplight, red, yellow, and green. When you're mixing, you got to turn on red, right? Well, anyhow, something happened. Somebody dropped a wrench or something in the mixer, and the station blew. And this kid was his name was Barnes. He was sitting in a chair with the door open, which he wasn't supposed to, and it blew him in the chair right straight out of the goddamn control station.
Down the crooked hallway?
He didn't get killed.
Oh.
You know?
It's
pretty interesting.
I just recently explored Camp Hermes up in Malta, the rocket test facility that they built after World War II to test, I forget what rockets were tested there. I think Nikes were tested there. It's underground test facilities. They would have gantries. They would put the rockets in for a static launch where they would...
They got them in Colorado.
Yeah.
In the mountain there, and they got them in... well, actually, believe it or not, Yuba City, California. They had silos there.
Yeah, this facility, I think they pretty much just... it was like a 140-acre test facility that they just started decommissioning in maybe like 20 years ago. It's up in Luther Forest.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah. It was interesting.
When we were